Hello, this begins videos in which I am going to interact from a Christian Reformed philosophy point of view to Hume's argument against miracles. Now I begin actually with a little scripture reflection. Hume raises a serious question. Why do we believe as Christians, if we are Christians, in things that do not appear to be, from the point of view of sense experience, the case? Just for a few verses as a starter. 1 Peter 3:3, where it says, "Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation." Now, Hume, David Hume, 18th century philosopher, about my favorite classical philosopher, really. Some Christians will critique Hume, and particularly Hume's argument against miracles, with some hostility and disdain for Hume, but really, although I am a believer and Hume is not, Hume is really someone worth knowing as a philosopher. Just from a literary point of view, generally what he writes as philosopher and also philosophical historian is easy to read, which isn't always the case with other texts in philosophy, classical or more modern. Now, I'm going to, in this video, begin not by citing Hume, but by citing a secondary source, which is a fair summary of Hume's argument against the rationality of belief in miracles found in part of his Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding. Consider for a moment the scripture miracle of Christ walking on the water. Here I'm reading from a secondary source. We suppose that it is a matter of natural law that a human being cannot walk on the surface of water while it is in its liquid state. This supposition is based on the weight of an enormous body of experience gained from our familiarity with what happens in seas, lakes, kitchen sinks, and bathtubs. Given that experience, we always have the best possible evidence that in any particular case, an object with a sufficiently great average density, having been placed onto the surface of a body of water, will sink. According to Hume, the evidence in favor of a miracle, even when that is provided by the strongest possible testimony, will always be outweighed by the evidence for the law of nature, which is supposed to have been violated. Now, couple clarification points. Hume is not saying that miracles don't happen. That would be very difficult to prove such a negative. But he is saying, well, suppose a miracle did happen. Isn't it always more reasonable to assume that the testimony of a miracle which we have not observed is in error, rather than to conclude that a miracle against the laws of nature did happen. Secondly, here is something that I wish both Hume and this secondary source had included. Namely, what really Hume is getting at is that we have experimental evidence that we, for example, cannot walk on water. We can try it any time we please by attempting to do so at a pool or even a bathtub by drawing water. We don't walk on the surface of water. That's experimental evidence, and we can repeat this as many times as we please. So I think this is what really Hume is getting at in his argument against the rationality of belief in miracles. Here is a slide that covers this video and the next. I have covered the basics of how we are to understand what Hume's basic position was against the rationality of belief in miracles. In the next video, I'm going to actually start reading that section of the inquiry concerning human nature, about the first paragraph or so. And curiously enough, Hume is inspired in his skepticism by a earlier Christian writer, Tillotson, Archbishop Tillotson, an Anglican. And so I'm going to start making the point that in responding as Christians to Hume, we have to be very careful not to have the wrong sort of apologetic response to skeptics like Hume, which has been actually, I would say, all too prevalent in the history of Christian apologetics. Bad arguments in favor of the truth of the Christian religion. Well, till next time.